Back in the day when I used to waste my time on Twitter, there would be some, because I would talk about this stuff, right? Some jackass would always show up and say, "Well, what about the fact that computers can teach themselves?" and blah blah blah, right? And I'm like, listen. What's going on in the data center? Tell me, to prove to me that you actually understand this technology.
Hi, hello, welcome everyone to this public event organized by International Socialists. I'm Mohammed. I'll be your chair for this meeting. The format is going to be, so we're going to have two panelists. We're going to have to my right, Denton. He's here from Tech Workers Coalition. He's a tech worker. Aspire and Luddite? Luddite.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that means. He just told me that. And work lead for resistance to techno-fascism. And on my left here is Dwayne Monroe, 30 years of experience. Okay.
Whichever works.
Whichever works, cool. 30 years of experience as a technologist in the United States and Europe, and he applied that to the Marxist analysis in technology. We will have both of them give an introduction, and then we're going to have a discussion around the room. Something for everybody to know here, that pictures will be taken. So if you don't want your pictures in social media, just raise your hands and the photographer will remove it afterwards.
Or talk to me afterwards.
Or talk to him afterwards. Okay. Okay, I think that's all I have for now. First of all, we'll start with, you can kick it off, yeah?
Cool.
The floor is yours.
Hey everyone, I'm Will, pronouns he, him. So I can't say I'm a journalist or an academic, but I am at the end of the day a worker. And I work in tech. I've been working in tech for over 10 years now. I've worked for AI companies, I've worked for non-AI companies, so I am both affected by this technology, generative AI, maybe just one quick thing. And anything I'll be talking about when I refer to AI, I'm specifically talking about generative AI. So I am both affected by this technology, and I have also worked in the companies where the sausage is made, so to say. So I think just some of the things I want to cover, I think I'm just going to focus mostly just around like how generative AI has been deployed in the workplace and how it has affected work. And I think just on a very high level, like some of the core ideas or concepts that I want to be able to cover or around, this I think at the end of the day, there's like this nagging question that we're all deeply uncomfortable with, which is like, is this fucking chatbot going to take my job? I think if I could summarize or simplify everything I want to talk about in just one sentence, it's that AI can't take your job. But that doesn't mean your boss won't try anyway. So following that, I think just like some very high level concepts that I want to reference when it comes to this idea of like work and generative AI is around like manufactured consent in media. Like, how did we get to this point of this like weird question and always looming in the back of our heads? Then also talking about like the myth of productivity, and then also kind of touch on like both my own personal experience, but also seeing like some patterns that have happened of just how this technology is playing out and how it's being deployed. So if there's one thing I love doing, it's quoting fucking tech executives. So maybe just indulging in this idea of like manufactured consent. I thought I would start off with this quote from Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, which is that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level white-collar jobs and spike unemployment to 10 to 20% in the next 1 to 5 years. which fucking one is it? Is it 10 or 20? Is it 1 or 5? Like, I think there's all of these CEOs are just awash with just self-indulgent statements that get absolutely no pushback. And for the past 3 years since ChatGPT 4 has been out, like mainstream media has just been sycophantic in their republishment of every single thought that has crossed their mind. And I think, and that is such an important, such an important concept to touch on of like, how did we get here? Is that there has been literally no critical pushback or critical thought or even consideration of like, hey, how did you arrive at that conclusion? Show me your notes. But I think a couple other studies that I think are worth referencing that kind of then lead into this, this concern around, and even this myth around productivity, is recently this study at MIT and then also this Stanford University study. I think the MIT study, maybe I'll just focus on that one, that I think that they had mentioned after surveying lots of different enterprises who have gone ahead and tried to implement generative AI solutions into their workplace, that I think it's, don't quote me on this, but it's something around 90 to 95% have failed in their implementation. And I think the statistics get even worse when you distinguish between like out-of-the-box solutions from OpenAI or Anthropic versus their own sort of homegrown setup. It gets even worse when you try to DIY it. And yet, even with a study like that, that is so obviously an indictment on this entire bubble that's been inflating for the past 3 years, one of the takeaways from that study was, yeah, but they kind of just didn't do it right. Like they didn't use actually those words, but kind of the undertone was like, they just didn't, it's human error, it's user error, they didn't implement it right. And that, like, that for me is just like such an obvious reminder of like we were so close and yet completely out of reach of just being able to call it what it is, which is like, it is a grift, and this is about keeping the promise of unlimited, never-ending growth afloat. But with that, I think the next thing to sort of talk about is around this concept of productivity. I think, again, no matter what sort of ideas are being purported, a lot of these sorts of myths that generative AI will either make you as an individual more productive, so you can get a leg up on your colleagues or your competitors, or and if you don't keep up, you will be made redundant because you are not towing the line, or you are not, able to keep up with the pace of innovation. I think no matter what, first of all, productivity, that has to be unpacked on at least 3 different levels of the level of the individual, the organization, and then I guess GDP, nation state levels. And regardless, I think, do a quick time check. Regardless, there is no conclusive evidence today that can be said that this technology makes you as an individual or makes organizations more productive. Now, I want to share that because as you maybe go on social media or maybe you chat with people, maybe obnoxious boosters in your life, they may cite cherry-picked sources or cherry-picked studies, and it's pretty intimidating when someone says, "Hey, I read a study," or "Hey, according to this study." But the important thing for all of us as critical people is to ask, show me your notes. How did you arrive at this conclusion? And also, who funded this study? Because you can't trust Microsoft's conclusions or a study that was funded by Microsoft. You can't trust their conclusions. So I think we need to dispel that myth around productivity. I think and even when it comes to like job losses, like, one of these big fears is like, hey, am I going to lose my job? I heard someone in my network or someone around me had lost their job to generative AI. And while that is true, like there can be job losses. Like, we cannot conclusively say that those job losses, like, there is a causative relationship between adopting generative AI and losing those jobs. If anything, like, the reason why, like, a lot of this happens is because companies tank so much fucking money into getting set up, either using these tools or even just like paying OpenAI or paying Anthropic, that all of these line items go down the toilet, so they cannot support that department or cannot support those individuals anymore. It's just a matter of just like, I don't know, a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. I think maybe even on my own experience, just kind of getting a bit into a smaller level. So how does this all play out? I think, I feel like the thing that I've observed in my own experience and hearing from other people is very much this like reinvigoration of Taylorism and speed ups and this kind of, I guess it wasn't algorithmic at the time, but it certainly was more calculated. Now we're in this algorithmic management era where certain choices are being made around what and how much you work on. And, while at least in my experience, like, being a tech worker with all the benefits and privileges that it comes with, there is a pretty drastic slowdown in hiring. But that has not changed the demands. But the demands from management have not changed in terms of how much work has to get done. So it's very much a do more with less, and don't worry, like, we'll just keep growing, it'll be great, and maybe use AI, and even just like to really go deeper onto that just kind of shrug is I've now worked at two jobs in the past. I guess 3 years since ChatGPT 4 has come out, where I kid you not, I have been sitting in all hands where leadership has said, hey, we believe that generative AI is the future. We strongly encourage you to use ChatGPT, to use Cursor, to use Copilot, to use whatever, you insert whatever tool. We're not going to tell you what you should use it for, and the subtext there being, we don't know. But we just bought it, and please, we gotta make some of this money back. And that is the underlying conceit, is that leadership has no fucking idea what it's like to be a worker. They have no idea what it's like to actually do the work beyond seeing just the tip of the iceberg of the outputs that you do, rather than like the entirety of the value that you create is the process, it's not just the like, oh, okay, this is the link to the thing that I made. So it's just it's very indicative that they are just completely out of touch with like what work is and what value all of our work brings. I think maybe just to start winding down a bit, because I only have a couple more minutes, I think some other things that so naturally that then kind of leads to the question of like, okay, so we're in a bubble, what does that mean and what can we do about it? And it also for what it's worth, like both Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg at this point have either directly said or hinted at the fact that, this is a bubble, we're in a bubble. So that's a bad sign, make no mistake. But I think when it comes to like, what can we all do? I think some things that I've been thinking about depending on our capacities and our interests, like one is around like holding media accountable again. There's just basic journalism that's just not being done, and I think we need to call people out on that. The other is like more workplace organizing. Like we desperately need stronger unions. I think as part of TWC, like something that we believe in is also supporting works councils. As flawed as as limited a tool as they might be, they're there and they're a lot stronger than you might think. And I think that's just one of many tools that we can use to actually put workers in a position to be able to slow down, stall, or outright reject a lot of predations of capital. So, I would really love to get to a point where, in the Netherlands, we have collective labor agreements that protect people against algorithmic management, that protect people against, unjust, surveillance and unjust hiring practices from some of these AI recruitment software, but then also the right to reject or the right to, not to give consent on using these technologies and not letting that be a factor in whether or not you continue to have that job or whether or not you grow. Because all of these, coming back to that, that idea of mismanaged management, that's what's getting incentivized is the people who are saying, look what I did with ChatGPT. And the other thing too is data centers. And I'm sure we can also talk about that a bit more, but just in the interest of time, data centers are being propped up in the US. There's a lot of overbuild going on, but there's also a lot of data centers here in the Netherlands. And even though, some of them are being reported as being fueled with 100% green energy, that's bullshit. They still consume a lot of water. They still, are extremely intensive on electrical grids. And I think that there's a lot of local organizing that can be done where, people can be able to defend their communities. So, cool, right on time.
Well, we'd like to know about
Thank you, Will, for that. Yeah, Dwayne?
Okay. Well, I'm practicing my Nederlander, so I guess I should try to say goedenavond? Okay. So I was described as a technologist and a Marxist. And so let's apply Marxism to technology, to the technology industry. Marxism, I think, has been, because of its balkanization within academics, the true usefulness of Marxist concepts has been lost because, I love my academics, well, some of them, but Marxism was defanged when it became a toy of the university. Two key concepts, even if you can't quote the 18th Brumaire, right? Dialectical materialism and historical materialism. These are tools, right? These are the tools that Marx and Engels left us and that Rosa Luxemburg and others and Lenin developed further. And that I come from, I'm a Black American, so the Kwame Ture and others in the Black radical tradition also applied these ideas to real world conditions. So historical materialism, let's apply that to AI in the tech industry. The term artificial intelligence was first coined in 1956 by John McCarthy and another group of scientists, computer scientists, at an event at Dartmouth College. It was understood at the time as an aspirational term because by the late 1950s, digital computers, which, mind you, had been created to help people like Edward Teller and Stanislaw Ulam build thermonuclear bombs, because they could do their chalkboard. Oppenheimer, as you saw in the movie, could do his chalkboard calculations for atomic detonations, but thermonuclear detonations were so subtle because you're going from fission to fusion. You're beginning to kind of get into the territory of the sun, right? The calculations were so subtle that they began to run out of their capacity to calculate them on the blackboard. To the rescue were the first generation of digital computers, right? And so at this conference in 1956 at Dartmouth, John McCarthy and his colleagues said, what are we doing with these computers? What is our goal? Well, our goal is to try to create a machine that can think for itself. But they never imagined that they could do that in 5 minutes. But even in the 1950s, you were starting to see, to Will's point about the media, even media from before I was born, and I'm an old fuck, right? You were seeing reports in the media of, although I look good, of electronic brains, right, that could match or exceed human capacity. 1956, mind you, right? So the propaganda about computation began almost from the start. Now, artificial intelligence as a research program belonged to the university and belonged to the military. Stanislaw Lem, the famous Polish science fiction author, wrote a book, a short story called Golem XIV, which is a brilliant, I guess, expression of what the dream was, like at that time, in the 1960s and 70s, of creating a thinking machine that would be a massive project. Fast forward to the 80s, the 90s, and so forth. There were periods of AI enthusiasm, periods of AI winter, when the promises were not met. That's the history of this. Now let's bring it to today. In the early 2000s, maybe the mid 2000s, mathematical principles that had been created in the 1950s and 60s, such as perceptrons and so forth, but these were mathematical ideas that they lacked the computation to be able to enact. By the early 2000s, certainly by 2010 or so, 2013, because of game processing units, right, it became possible to enact some of these mathematical ideas that had been first thought of decades ago, but now you have the hardware to actually perform it. Well, by this time, you had something that did not exist in the 1950s or 60s, 70s, 80s, but by the 80s, yes, but not in the form it has now, which is Silicon Valley. And they glommed onto this and said, oh, you know what? This is a product that we can sell. So what had been a research program, what had been an aspiration, became the potential for a product. Pardon me. And so large language models, large, computationally intensive, language, it takes in language, text, and so forth, as its input, and model. There's a model of how we use language. This is why they've had to steal all of our books, all of our Reddit posts, all of our social media posts. In order to make the text plausible, it had to have billions and billions and billions of examples. But it's still probabilistic, right? And this is why it can't be trusted. And this is why I propose that for those of us on the left, there is no use for this technology. It belongs to the ownership class. I'm not saying there's no use for computation, because a complex society needs computation. Some of you are probably familiar with the work of Stafford Beer and Cybersyn in Allende's Chile. I suggest you pick up a book called The Cybernetic Brain, which gives you a history of cybernetics, because that's where things really start. But anyway, we have use for computation. We don't have use for large language models, because there's no way for them, and no matter what Sam Altman and any of them say, there's no way to make this stuff really work. And by work, I mean make it accurate, because it's always probabilistic. So you could get a good output at this time index and get a bad output at the next time index. And the same thing applies to Gen AI. The same thing applies to Sora, which creates images, 6 fingers 1 minute, 5 fingers the next. You can't make films with that. And it's incredibly computationally intensive and wasteful of our resources. We need that computation for the people's business. We need that computation for analyzing climate change. We need that computation for analyzing what we'll have to do to deal with the impacts of climate change. How will we manage our food allocations? How will we manage how we do anything in an Earth that is damaged, and it will be more damaged by what capitalists are doing to it as we sit here right now, right? And so I'm not against technology. I am a Luddite, though, because General Ludd was not anti-technology. Ludd was against the use of technology against people. If you could have, and this is, of course, the reason why we think that Ludd was against technology is, again, even back to the 19th century, the media portraying, right? I like to look at Roman ruins because I like to see an empire in ruins. That's, right? But all of the information that the Romans have left to us, all of the inscriptions is the inscriptions of the oppressor. So they're telling their story, but that isn't actually the story of Rome, right? People like historians like Mary Beard give you that story as best as is possible. Our story is being told by people who are trying to make money. The journalists who are unwilling or unable to tell the truth. And the truth being, getting to dialectical materialism, the fact that data centers, as Will began to talk about, are the heart of all of this. There's nothing without data centers. No. Okay. Whenever. Oh, okay. It's all good. Back in the day when I used to waste my time on Twitter, there would be some, because I would talk about this stuff, right? Some jackass would always show up and say, well, what about the computers can teach themselves and blah, 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 right? And I'm like, listen. What's going on in the data center? Tell me, to prove to me that you actually understand this technology the way that I do, because I've been the guy who cut his hands in the data center, who racked the servers, who understood how this stuff works, who understand what these companies are doing at a material level, right? What goes on in the data center? Whiteboard for me, because as a systems architect, that's what I say for everything. Whiteboard for me, what's for dinner? Whiteboarded. Whiteboard for me, how this stuff works at a material level. The mathematics are great. I am very impressed with the mathematics. The ability to produce plausible outputs is very impressive. That's something that should be studied by scientists and linguists, right? There's a use for that, although just on a laptop, not occupying a data center. Show me that you actually understand this. And they would always just go back to glittering generalities, as the sociologists call it, right? Just, well, this will happen, that'll happen, all problems will be solved. It's more of a religion than it is an actual understanding of what is an engineering tool, and an engineering tool in the service of capital, right? As is almost all engineering today. I propose that computation in our present situation is the command and control layer of capitalism. That's its purpose, which means that this technology, so-called artificial intelligence, is being used to enhance that command and control function. Right? Now, to also to speak to a little bit about Will talked about, I suggest people follow Ed Zitron and David Gerard. They may not share our politics, it doesn't matter, because they are hard-nosed, hard-boiled materialists when it comes to what's happening with this industry. Zitron in particular has been tracking where the money has come from and where the money has gone for years. And he knows where the bodies are buried, so to speak, of the money flows. And he's the one who was saying that this is indeed a bubble. Because recently you might have heard about the investment of Oracle with OpenAI. It's a circular investment in which Oracle says, we'll spend $100 billion on you. And then NVIDIA says, oh, well, you know what? We're going to charge you to rent our GPUs, so we'll make money from you. And then OpenAI says, oh, well, then we'll invest in Oracle. So you can see this money motion, right? But what's missing from this? What is missing from this entire thing? Profit. And so if capitalists can't produce profit, then the game is up, because that's really the only thing that they're after. And so what the Silicon Valley has done by poisoning what was a scientific research program, turning it into a product, selling it to everyone as the solution to all their problems. What Silicon Valley has done in the final analysis is created the basis for what is the biggest disaster I think I have seen in my entire career. I have seen bullshit for decades from the tech industry, but this is the greatest pile of shit I have ever seen. I mean, it's like a K2 height of shit, right? You could probably see it from space. It's so gigantic. It's unprecedented. It's absolutely unprecedented because in the past, companies would lie, but at least at the end of the day, you'd have a product. Like if Oracle, well, fuck Oracle, but Microsoft, which is okay, just as bad. But anyway, if Microsoft said SQL Server will solve all your problems, they were lying. But at least you'd have a database at the end of the day, right? A business, an organization, anybody could use a database. Anybody can use Microsoft Excel. It's an actual useful product. I mean, yes, Microsoft is horrible, but it isn't a useful thing. Just like Ford Motor Company and other capitalist enterprises, well, they make a car. You can use the car. Use value, exchange value. Well, this AI, this ChatGPT, it has no value at all, right? So anyway, in conclusion, I'll just say that I suggest that as a counter move to the pushing of this technology into our lives, in government, in business, in personal life, study it. You have to study your enemy to know what they're going to do, what they're likely to do. You must think materially. You must think about data centers. You must think about the consumption of energy. You must think about the flows of capital, and then you'll have an understanding so that when you read bullshit in the media, you can say, yeah, not only do I know it's bullshit, but I know why it's bullshit. And yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn the discussion to the floor. Just raise your hand and I'll take